Hey, it's Morgan, and welcome back to another econ review. Today we will be discussing both demand and supply curves. So when discussing supply and demand curves, the two factors are always going to be is the y-axis is always going to be the price, and the x-axis is always going to be the quantity. And the difference is either quantity demanded or the quantity supplied. When drawing a demand curve, you have to think of how the price affects the quantity that people demand. So, as if the price is really high, less people are going to want to buy it. So that means that the line goes like this. So as it gets cheaper, more people want to buy it. The demand goes up. So this is our demand curve. Now the opposite goes for supply curve. As there is more quantity supplied, it starts off with the price really high. But as less quantity is being supplied, it gets really low. So this is our supply curve. Now let's begin to actually interpret this graph. Let's start right here. So this point right here, where the supply and demand curve meet, is called the point of equilibrium. And that point is where the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. So that means that both consumer and producer surplus is maximized in this free market. Now, what is consumer and producer surplus, you may be asking? Well, consumer surplus is how much the consumer gains out of a trade, while producer surplus is how much the supplier gains. Now let's have a look at how that looks on this graph. So everything above this line, reaching out to the demand curve, is the consumer surplus. And that is because, let's just say right here, this person is willing to pay, let's say, around $10, but they actually only pay $5. So they are gaining that much from the trade. So everyone up here, all these consumers are gaining from the trade. On the other hand, everything below this line, reaching the supply curve, is the producer surplus. This is basically saying that this person is willing to sell it for, let's say, $1, but they end up selling it for that $5. So they gain that much from the trade all the way to this point of equilibrium where the demand and supply are the same. Now let's look at what happened if the price isn't set at the equilibrium point of $5. Let's say instead it's set here at $2.5. So as you go across, here's what it is, the quantity supplied is, and here's what the quantity demanded is. Now, since the quantity demanded is right here, and there's less being supplied, that means that we have a shortage. There's less being made than what is demanded. Now let's say that it shifts up here, and the price is at $7. There's the demand, and there's the supply. Now here, we have a surplus, because more is being produced than what is being demanded. Alright, now let's look at what shifts these entire curves completely. For the entire demand curve to shift, we use our acronym PITAR. And that stands for population or popularity, how popular it is, income, expectation, taste and advertisement, and also related goods. So let's just do an example of that. Let's say that in this graph talking about shoes, and the popularity of shoes increases. That means that not only is the price going to increase, but the quantity demanded for them is also going to increase. So our demand curve is going to shift like this. Not only does this change the demand curve in general, but it also changes the point of equilibrium. The equilibrium point used to be here, but now it's changed and it's up here. So the point of equilibrium, the prices increase, and so has the demand. Now let's look at the factors that make the supply curve change. And the acronym we use for that is PICOPO. And that stands for the producers, the input prices, technology, government policy, and again, expectations. Now let's put this in an example. Let's go back to our example of shoes. So let's say that the input price of leather, let's say that leather is absolutely needed to make these shoes. So the input price of leather goes up. That means overall it's more expensive to make these shoes. So the supply curve is going to shift over here, because it's going to cost more and the quantity supplied is going to be less. Once again, this affects our point of equilibrium, because our original point of equilibrium was right here. But now the price has gone up and the quantity has gone down. Thank you for watching my review video. I hope you liked it and I hope you learned a little bit more about economics, and I'll see you next time.